everybody, welcome back to Pre-Hospital Paradigm Podcast. I'm Scott Wildenheim. I got my crew down here. I got at the far end, I got Dr. John Hill. I got Ray Pace here, and our returning guest, Don Zimmerman. Thanks for coming back,
Absolutely.
buddy. We got a continuation of our mass casualty discussion that's been going on all month. We are here live, as one could easily figure out. We're here live at Chardon Fire Department in Chardon, Ohio, and we have Chief Justin Geis here, and we'll let him say a few words about his crew and his department. Chief Geis. Well, thanks for having us, and tell us a little bit about Chardon.
Thanks for having the opportunity to have you guys here. I appreciate it. It means a lot to us. Chardon Fire is located in Chardon City on the square. Been here since 1877. Cover about 13,000 residents. We cover Chardon Township, Chardon City, half of Clarendon Township, and Aquila Village. Respond to around 2,400 calls a year, and operate 3 ALS ambulances along with our fire apparatus.
Awesome. Well, again, we appreciate you getting us set up here this evening and doing our mass cal with our esteemed colleague here, Mr. Zimmerman, who has just recently retired. So congratulations on your retirement. Yes. Retired again, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. You're gonna
Eternal.
Eternal. But got to do all the usual housekeeping stuff, of course. All of this streaming, everything here is brought to you by FirstNet and Cradlepoint. So FirstNet is so gracious to sponsor us, and anybody that isn't on the First Responder Network that wants to take advantage of a discount, if you go to prehospitalparadigm.com/FirstNet, there is a coupon code there for a discount on the FirstNet service, and Cradlepoint is the backbone, is the hardware that gets all this out into the air. So all this goes out over the FirstNet network with Cradlepoint's help. So we appreciate both of them sponsoring us and getting us on the air every month. In addition to that, we would love to come see you, right?
Yes.
So if you are UH Medical Control Department and you'd like us to come visit and you'd like to host us at your department, again, prehospitalparadigm.com. If you go to the bottom of the links for podcast, there's a host podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Then all of this is now available for continuing education. So if you are in need of Ohio continuing education, we have free Ohio continuing education for all of these programs, the pre-recorded plus this live. Again, prehospitalparadigm.com, and I'm going to plug it one last time. Prehospitalparadigm.com is where all the show notes and all the important stuff about all of these sessions, we got all that packed in there. There's far more content in there, including all of our free open access medical content that all of UH puts out, whether that's our medical director minutes, whether that's our Pharmacy Friday, all that content, all kinds of goodness there. Dr. Hill just put up a mental health for providers piece that came out of some work that has yet to be aired, but will be coming up here in 25. Which is a whole provider mental health session, and actually that was a really, really good session, and I hope everybody takes something out of that. But we wanted to make sure that those resources were available for everybody, and we Dr. Hill set up a really nice piece of the page. So go check that out. Again, prehospitalparadigm.com. End of that nonsense. Let's talk about mass casualty stuff. So, Don, for those that maybe haven't watched the preceding episodes and the recorded stuff, really what you're offering up is kind of a paradigm change from what we were taught in textbooks, something that more reflects the realities of today. Can you kind of recap a little bit what the foundation of and how you got to this relatively low-hanging fruit? Once you said it, it's like, duh, this is a lot of this we should have recognized and should have been responding to, but our teachings have been stagnant. So
Sure. Well, as emergency responders, we always try to do better. We try to learn from our past mistakes. We try to get better at things. And so, really, Columbine may have been the first national one that really kind of set the wheels in motion for EMS and law enforcement to maybe reconsider their techniques and their tactics. And as those mass casualties kind of came to light, they would do after-action reports, which we would start to review. We do after-action reports for, we review studies all the time in medicine to try to figure out what's working and what's not. And so it only made sense that we would look at the after-actions. And we found a huge disconnect because, what you remember in your basic EMT book from even 30 years ago was, this is, you put out the tarp, you put up the flag, you got your reds, your yellows, your greens, and then over the years, we've tried to improve that and maybe sometimes clouded it a little bit. The word triage, T-R-I, that's 3, and the French word triage means to sort in 3s, but all of a sudden we've got gray expectant, we've got, obviously the black deceased, but you've also got yellow prime in some locations. So all of a sudden we've tried to make it better, but sometimes have
added complexity.
Yeah. And so, but probably the biggest thing was that triage tags was the foundation of what that was, because once you devote time to assessing a patient, you need to be able to say, this patient was assessed and is this. Don't waste your time, go to the next one. And we see from these mass, mostly shootings, but also bombings, that we're just not doing that. And so as the after actions came out and we started reviewing, we're like maybe we should throw out the triage tags. Like maybe we should just say we're done, because it's not getting done anyways on these big events. And nobody's blaming these departments because they're getting hit with the biggest incident of their lives. And of course it's under a national microscope with the media and people with cell phones and things. So it's really, let's look at those and figure out why is it that they're not working, and then what is important to keep and what is not important to keep. And really that's what started this about 4 years ago. We got a pretty big group of people together, had meetings at numerous county levels, hospital systems, medical directors, doctors, first responders, and tried to look at what can we do to make this a little bit better.
One of the kind of compelling things that I recall in our recorded discussion now months ago, of course it aired this month, but we recorded it multiple months ago, was your very on the spot statement of, for the first time ever, when we have events where it's in everybody's best interest to leave. Right. We trained for this very static event, and I think you even alluded to that. The model for the whole system was really based off of a bus accident, a bus rollover. That doesn't meet really what's happening in today's world, in today's society, with these events that we're seeing. Right.
When you talk about transportation accident, whether it's a bus or an aircraft or a train or a ship, it doesn't matter. That original triage model can still work. Because if you've got a tour bus that flops over on the highway, where's everybody going to go? Like, they're stranded there. And if you tell the people that we would associate as green with a stable injury, to walking wounded, to sit by the guardrail, they're going to go, okay, like I don't have any other choice.
No other choice.
But when you're at a high school football game and gunshots ring out and people are being struck, they're not going to say, yeah, sure, I'll sit over here. They want to go. And even if they've got somebody critically injured, they're not going to wait for an ambulance. They're going to load them up in a car. And we see this over and over and over again, that the majority, over 50% of the patients in almost all these incidents are transported by personal vehicle or law enforcement, because it was the best answer at that time. But it really comes down to, and that's where I personally, as a paramedic instructor for years, looked at it and said, is this really what we want? Do we want the most critical patients? Do we want 15 of the 17 criticals from Aurora, Colorado going in a police car to the hospital? I'm not saying it was the wrong decision, but I'm saying is that where we want to be? And if not, how do we fix that? Like, how do we figure out what caused that and try to get, I don't know, 4 of those patients, 8 of those patients? We may not get them all, but can we get more?
More, right.
Sure, so we can help them on the way to the hospital. So we can deliver some form of treatment.
Some care, right.
Yeah, we want to deliver some care. And I think, Dawn, to your point, these events have changed so much. You know, I mean, we all remember watching the bus video and the start triage and the fireman opening the back door and doing that. And the
people
events,
moaning.
Yeah, people moaning. And like the events have changed and shifted from that static event to a very dynamic event, which you talked about in depth on the recorded version of the content that's on our website.
Right. So just like firefighters, will basically broadly paint a structural fire as a defensive or offensive attack. That you're not saying it's going to stay defensive. It may turn into an offense, or it may go the other way. Sure. But we know that there's certain techniques that work better if it's a defensive than if it's an offensive. And so in that same respect, if we can label an incident that we're responding to as a static or a dynamic, it can help and make our job easier, because we're like, that doesn't work in dynamic events, or that's a great way to handle a dynamic event. It's a tool that we wouldn't even pull out for a static event, but we might for a dynamic, because we've seen it work in some situations. So it's really a matter of getting that figured out, which one it is. So really our best definition is that a dynamic event is changing, it's evolving. You don't know what's happening next. September 11th was a good example. Like, we didn't know. I was pretty far away, but I was on duty, from the Twin Towers. But my thought was, what if something happens here now? Like, I don't know where this is going to end. That was clearly a dynamic event, because you don't know and it's evolving. Another one is, a lot of times people just have a reason to flee. The Boston Marathon bombing and the backpacks, those people wanted to get out. So they were fleeing in all directions, and sometimes not the best direction, but at that time it seemed like the smartest way to go. I stepped on a ground hornet's nest right by the lake once, true story, and I didn't even jump in the water, and I don't know why I didn't jump in the water. It was the obvious choice, but when you're fleeing, you don't think about those things. And so those are some good guidelines to say, okay, this is probably more of a dynamic event. It's not something that maybe you have to declare on your paperwork or declare on the radio. It's more like, this is just the way we're going to set up this process.
So you already alluded to the fact in your recall of some of those other dynamic events that kind of set you on this pathway to kind of redefining how to change this, that the triage tags don't get used. In addition to the triage tags, what other things change in a dynamic event that basically are textbook static events that literally we've all trained on, right? What are the misses there, and more importantly, how do we tune our response to a dynamic event rather than a static event?
So triage tags is a great way to start that conversation, because that was a huge part of that. Was like question number one. Course, should we throw out triage tags? Nobody uses them ever. Should we throw them away? And it became obvious, reading all the after actions and the recommended practices and discussions, that we need the tags, but the tags do take time, and sometimes they're not in the right location. It doesn't do any good if you're, grab your bags and start walking up a highway to a pretty big collision, and you can't get close enough, so you just see smoke ahead and cars ahead, so you just start walking because your ambulance won't go any further. Sure. That if you don't have your tags with you, well, you're not going to use a tag, are you? If it's under the bench seat or something like that. So we decided that tags do have to be used, but probably in a static event they could come out kind of quick, because you have time. Carbon monoxide at the church, you got 35 people. Tag them, get the reds, the yellows, and the greens separated so we know. I mean, really, the color is really just telling us who gets transported first, and in some situations who goes to the trauma center, really. Right. Because in an active shooter event, a red should never go to a non-trauma center if there's a choice, right? And a green should never go by a helicopter if there's a choice. So it helps us guide those types of decisions that we might make in the back of our minds without thinking about it. But another one, for instance, is besides when that tag is used, is sifting and sorting is a term that they kind of used around Nevada. The state of Nevada was some of the first places that I had seen written reports of that. And basically, suppose you had a dynamic scene with a lot of people down. So let's just say that there was an active shooter, and it appears as though the shooter is done now. We don't know, but it appears as though it's at least a warm zone now, if not a cold. You got a lot of people laying around. You don't have time to be pulling out tags and putting tags on everybody and deciding what severity they are. But maybe the answer is to use the ribbons. So you don't actually use, a color code with a tag. You use a color code with a ribbon. Now, a lot of ribbon sets come in red, yellow, green, black, and what we're trying to do is get away from that because you don't have time to decide their injuries. And a lot of times yellows turn red pretty fast, and then they might turn the black or black-white slash pretty quickly. But it works great if you use two colors. The old days used to be a black ribbon, surveyor's tape. Now it's a black-white hash because you can see it a little better in the dark. So you use that one and an orange one. An orange kind of slurs red and yellow. You don't really know, but they're hurt. They need help. They need to be they need to be carried out of there. They need to be littered. So if you were the first person in there with a pair of gloves, and basically you would come to your first victim on the ground, we would probably do some LSI, some life safety interventions that we would learn, like in our rescue task force or stop the bleed, where we might do a tourniquet, we might lay them on their side, we might open their airway. Yeah, those basic, real quick life-saving interventions. And then we would put a ribbon on them. And this, we're talking like a 3-foot ribbon towards the aisle on an arm, a leg, it doesn't matter, it needs to be visible. And black-white means we're not going to do anything here, and orange means the person needs to be moved. We may have greens that we actually don't even use a green ribbon on. We just tell them go over there to where we're going to start doing a casualty collection point. So as you're throwing those ribbons on, that's something that I probably would not recommend using in a bus crash because it's just wasted steps. Let's just go right to the tag. That's where we need to be. Whereas if you're using the ribbons, all you're doing is the next wave of rescuers that come in. If they have ribbons, they already know those were taken care of, but I see people over there that don't have ribbons. I'm going to go ribbon them or tell them to leave. And then what I'm going to do is, if I have even just some do-gooders, some good Samaritans, some people that just, hey, I got a can-do attitude. What do you need? Can we help? Yes, you can. Take this backboard, take this mega mover, take this litter, take this tarp, whatever. Get in there. If you see this tag, or the ribbon, the black, the white, do not touch. Part of the crime scene. Instead, you see orange. That's the one you want. Bring them back to me. Then what they do is they bring them to the casualty collection point, and then that's where they would actually be triaged officially.
You do the initial sift.
Yes, you got it. So that's a good example of one where you might use in a dynamic that's probably not as important.
I like the ribbon. I think it's because we only want to spend so much time with each patient. So back to your ribbon point versus, and I know in the recorded version, we go through all the different types of triage systems, how they can be a little bit robust. So you stop as that provider. I'm trying to take care of this patient, and then I'm trying to remember, RPM, I'm going down all these different things when there's 10 other people that are screaming, past the first victim, and we want to help as many people as we can. So I really like the ribbon in the dynamic event. It's quick. They're not able to move on their own. They're hurt. They need a tourniquet. I put a tourniquet on them. I can go to the next person because maybe that next person needs a tourniquet, and then they'll get that triage tag that I'm sure we're going to talk about this in front of us in a little bit.
In a few minutes.
At the casualty collection point, that helps the transportation officer be able to, figure out how many resources do they need, air, ground, where are they going to go. So I think it's a huge point, and it really, I think a lot of people dwell on triaging that person on, the color. Well, they're yellow or they're red. They really get into that debate. I think they waste a lot of time doing that. That's just my personal opinion. I've seen that in some drills that have happened as well, where people get hung up, and that's just delaying care of the next person.
Yeah, it's beat into your head from the second day of EMT school, right?
Yep.
This is the way it is.
What I like about the ribbons the best is the black-white ones. Just to, what we talked about in the live show, is that way you're not re-triaging the same dead person, right?
Right.
So if Ray walks through first, I happen to be a few minutes behind Ray, I don't see him check everybody. If there's not a ribbon, which is highly going to be visible, right? Because we're going to make him really long, put him right where everyone should be walking, that I know that person's been checked and I can go on to the next person. So
I believe it was the Las Vegas shooting.
the Mandalay Bay.
You said in the after action that there was one patient that got triaged.
Yeah, something like 7 times or something.
Yeah.
They saw it on a closed circuit camera
Yeah,
when they were
watching
looking
it,
at it
yeah.
later, and
Playing it.
everybody kept going to that same person. And two things. Number one is you're wasting time. Like, we need you to be checking someone else. We don't want you to go back and do the same thing. And number two, sometimes those injuries are just like, you don't need to see that. Just keep walking. There's no reason to even stop.
Yeah, take on more of that mental burden.
You got enough.
What about the various ways to assess and treat patients? The SALT start, jump start. How focused do we need to be in the RPM style? How
USA.
How focused does the provider need to be on hitting those points that we were taught every single time?
So obviously that the colors that I talked about, and you see urgent, emergent, non-urgent, and you're like, I don't even know what colors those are with, and depending which system you're with. And, probably the best one we found as we were looking that I just love was USA. Unstable, stable, and ambulatory. You know what I mean? Which one is it? And that's going to be, your green, yellow, and red. And it's easy then.
And that's almost instinctual.
Yeah, because we know,
That's every day.
If you're going to the
it's
hospital,
quick.
the doctor's going to ask, are they stable? Like, we already know what stable and unstable is, right?
Right.
Sure.
So, did you want to have something else?
No,
Okay.
I agree with you. I think I like that, to your point. I like the USA one the best because we were just reviewing this month at our place, and USA just kept coming up, and it's quick, it's fast. You're not trying to remember all the stuff like you just said. It's
right.
It makes you more decisive. You can help more people. It's more efficient.
Right. And the way we get to USA then is from SALT or with START. And, one thing we found in our area, at least, is a lot of the counties have their own mass casualty plans. So we had to make sure we were meeting with the county emergency management agencies and make sure that what we were looking at, we looked at their plans ahead of time. We kind of took them under advisement, compared, and then we went back and presented to the 5 counties in northeastern Ohio and actually said, this is what we would like to change. And there were almost every one of them, probably it was a boilerplate deal, but they officially in this county, we will use START. And, START, it uses the RPM, the respirations, the pulse, the mental status. And, the problem is you could have a gunshot wound to the chest and still be in the parameters of RPM in some situations. And we would look at them and go, unstable.
No, like a shot.
But no. If you follow START, which we have to in our policy, that patient is actually green right now. Oh, they just went yellow. Oh, they're red now. They're dropping pretty quick. So the first thing, and so we had several of them go, well, we'll change that. We'll change that to SALT. And they're like, no, stop. We think that there's a good use for START. In a lot of them, the transportation accidents, START actually is the best one. And then when you're looking at violent incidents, dynamic scenes, SALT tends to work a little better. And the big reason why is because it matches what we're teaching with Rescue Task Force, with TECC, where we're doing life-saving interventions. Like, where is LSI? Where is tourniquet in START? It's not there. There is no such
START's
thing.
40 years old.
Right.
True.
But even TECC and the Rescue Task Force is, 20 at best?
Yeah. Yeah.
So START hasn't evolved in a generation.
Right. But I feel in some incidents, START works just fine.
Sure.
And in some of them, salt is far better. You know, there was a study done in this report here, this mass casualty trauma triage, paradigms and pitfalls, which I suggest everybody read. But it has great things in there, but it talked about how they took seasoned paramedics from a certain area, and I don't remember the exact, but they basically gave them these patients, and they said, here, you follow START. They gave them the cheat sheets, and they went ahead and marked them down. And then they grabbed the same number of paramedics in the second group, and they said, we want you to use salt. I want you to go ahead and decide whether these are red, yellows, or greens. And then the third group, they're like, just tell us.
Tell us.
Just look at them and tell us. Guess which group did the best? Like, it obviously comes down to experience, but when you got firefighters that'll read smoke, you know, Dave Dodson, and go, well, that's a deep-seated fire. I know it is just by the smoke. Well, there are a lot of paramedics that can just look at it and go, that, my friend, is a tension pneumothorax.
Right.
I don't know why I know that, but I can tell from here that is a tension pneumothorax. You know what I mean? Because they've seen it. And so that has to count for something. So I was really trying to get the counties to say, look, these are the acceptable ones, but let's not hold someone to one system. You know, I feel like if all of us say that patient is yellow, but one of us says, patient, I think it is red. I think that patient should be red. Like, somebody sees something that we don't. You know, our real problem is when we have 10 patients and we say they're all red. Well, what do we do now? I mean, we don't know who to transport by helicopter. We don't know who to send to the trauma center, and we don't know who goes first. So we need to break that down. That's where that secondary triage comes in, and START will say, well, use their blood pressure, use this and all that. And those are good solutions for some patients. But I mean, I like to use the example of carbon monoxide. You get 35 people in a church with carbon monoxide poisoning, you might have 30 of the 35 are yellows. Well, that doesn't help you at all.
Nope.
Technically, they are yellows by SALT, by START, and by your opinion.
By every paradigm, yeah.
So the problem is you need a way to break them down. So now you got to get creative. You know, maybe you put, you put the CO detector on them, whether it's RAD 57 or whatever, and you try to get a reading of what's their carbon monoxide level. And I may not even know what the blood levels is, but I found a bunch of people that had zeros, and I found 4 of them with 6s, and I saw 2 of them had over 13. Well, guess what? You're now my reds 13s because new rule. And we know, like, the youngest and the oldest don't do well. So maybe they just go to red. You know what I mean? And the ones that we gave oxygen to and pretty much are feeling pretty good, maybe we bump them down to green. Because we need to get them in an order, you know? You know, think of picking basketball teams in grade school at gym, and they put you by height, you know, against the wall. We need to do that with our patients.
So kind of back to your sifting and sorting, there's an online question here. This was really talking about the streamers, the ribbon color. And the question is, what will the hospitals and police do with the ribbon? Are they trained to know what they mean, or is this strictly for EMS?
So I would say that probably the best answer is that it's strictly for EMS, and it's early in EMS. It's when you're really getting bludgeoned, you have way too many patients with serious injuries that you have you feel like you have no control over this. You're one of the first arriving. There's no way you can do tags in that situation. The ribbon might be your best. When we get to the hospital, the ribbons will mean very little to them, especially if they have an orange ribbon.
Of course.
But hopefully that at some point they get a tag, you know, and really what we pushed was that if an ambulance is transporting for a mass casualty, even if you don't fill out the tag, even if you don't mark if they're red or yellow, at least give them a tag and take a receipt. We call it a receipt when you can tear off a piece that's got a number or a barcode so that you can keep track. And hopefully when the patient gets to the hospital, if they don't have a tag, that the hospital will put the tag. So the question is, does the hospital are they trained on colors? A lot of the hospitals have seen our training, so they might be up on it. If they're working in the ER, they might be a little more familiar with it or ask about it. But in, I guess, a perfect situation, the patient would never arrive at the hospital with a ribbon. They would have a tag.
They would be tagged in that time.
And they may still have a ribbon on, or they may not.
I like your point there, too. Is if that patient received a ribbon and they come out, let's say it's just a red to make it really easy. I have an ambulance readily available. We're in Chardon, so we'll use Chardon. And I can't fill any of this out, but if you're the transporting ambulance, we can take the sticker off, stick it on our sheet, say Chardon Fire, where they're going, let's say UH Geauga, and then that goes with the patient. And then down the road, when it gets to the hospital, they're going to be able to identify who the patient is, put that into the system. So eventually the number on our sheet will correlate with the patient's name and more information. Or the squad going to the hospital will get more information on the way, right? So I think even at a minimum for, let's say, your transportation officer, as long as you have a sticker, who took them and where they went, at the end of the day, you have the 3 most vital pieces of information, unless you disagree, Don. I just want
No,
to
I agree,
like, open that a little
100%. And that number then, if everyone continues to use that number through, eventually someone is going to attach the patient's name to that, and they're going to put them in the state tracking database, because that's a law that the hospitals have to do that, and they are doing that. Every hospital is doing that in Ohio. If they're using the number EMS assigned, by the time EMS logs in back at the station after the call, they can actually look up the number and go, oh, I got the name now, and I got the address of the patient that we took. We didn't know. Yeah, they were calling her Cindy, but we didn't know what her last name was. We didn't know if it was Cindy, Cynthia, what. So yeah, that's, if we all use the same number, then that's the way to go.
So I guess that inherently leads into
It did. It brought on tags, didn't it?
Butts tags nicely, and let's just. So what is the fundamental problem with the triage tags that exist, and of course, then what have you and your colleagues attempted to do in the space of revising that?
Well, if we look at the after actions, we know the biggest problem with tags is they're just not used.
Just used, right.
And even local incidents that were just maybe 10 patients from a car crash, several cars in a snowstorm or something, that the tags just don't get used. So then it really came down to, why are the tags not being used? And some of the after actions came back and said, for the Boston bombing, they had a really good explanation on why. You know, the patients were treated in, I think it was alpha tent, they called it, at the finish line, and that, you know, they didn't have tags in alpha tent, and that by the time ambulance got there, they were already being told where to take them. So then they're like, well, no reason to tag now, because we already know, because they were treated by, you know, seen by physicians or nurses or medics in the tent. So we see all of those, and then we can talk to local departments. Hey, I noticed you guys had this and everything. We know you didn't use any tags, and we're just curious, why? Did you think of it? You know, did it ever occur to you, or was it just not in the bag? And a lot of times that was the situation, was we didn't think of it till it was too late, or we didn't think they're under the bench seat in the bag where they always are, or I don't know where they're at, you know. And then they don't really feel comfortable using them either. You know, you give a blank tag to an EMT student, they're going to want to fill out everything on that tag. And that's the last thing we want to do, especially a dynamic event. So when we looked at the tags and evaluated them, we looked at the top 6 in the country, and you know, we found good points and bad points on a lot of them. The cheapest tag out there is, I believe, called the Met tag, and a lot of counties in our area had them in EMA because they were pretty cheap to get, and they were just tear off. So you just tear off the black if they're not dead, you tear off the red if they're not red, and then unfortunately, if the patient did turn into red, then all of a sudden you're like, ruh-roh, I don't have
Scotch tape, and you start putting them back.
Like, I don't have that. So then the only solution is get another tag. Well, now you've got 2 patients because people have been tearing receipts with that number. Like, that's got to be a steadfast rule that, number 1, everybody's got to get a tag, and number 2 is nobody gets 2. They only get 1, and that stays with them the whole time, all the way through family reunification, that number. So we looked at those, so we almost felt like we needed more receipts. The DMS tag had a lot of receipts. You would tear off, but it had second tear offs, and the DMS, there's probably like 30 out there, different types of tags. They have a lot of different options. But when we're trying to look at them, some had good parts, some had bad parts. You know, another part of the tag is if we want this patient to have this number from being seen on a TARP to family reunification, once we figure out who this is and tell their family which hospital to go to find them, that we can't have the hospital taking off the tag. And we know from working at a hospital that the hospitals do not like tags.
Right.
What do they like? They like wristbands. So our tag needs to have a wristband, and then the steadfast rules for ERs is, hey, when the patient comes in, if they don't have a tag, they get a tag. And second of all, if you don't like that tag and you want to get rid of that tag, you will never get rid of that tag until you put the wristband off of there onto there. Now, is EMS allowed to tear that off during transport if they have a couple seconds downtime and go, you know what, I'm just going to do this now so it's done, and put the wristband on them?
Spectacular.
Fine.
Yeah.
That's perfect. But at least that number's following them. So when we take those things that we don't want to tag this crazy busy, because we don't want people to fill the whole thing out. When you start looking at, we need more receipts. A lot of them have nice tear-off receipts. The Commonwealth Virginia tag, the DC area tag, it's known now, they had some stickers on there, and I thought, man, that has to be the best idea, because instead of these little tiny pieces of paper flying around, I got pictures from mass casualty drills where those tags are just blowing around and trying to put them on a clipboard. Well, a sticker, that's better. I mean, think about it. A transportation officer at the scene could use a form like that, just stick the sticker on there and write down what they know, and they can keep track of it. If you're in the ambulance, you got 3 patients in the back, which nobody likes 3 in the back, but you might get 3 in the back, especially yellows or reds. Then if you can't do anything else, at least peel a sticker off of their tags and stick it right on the back of your iPad, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right on the
pants,
wall, your pants, wherever, I don't care. But stick that sticker, because that's how you know that you had that patient. If you're driving that squad, maybe the answer is you took 3 patients the first time and you just go thump, 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 and you put the first 3 in a column. That was my first trip, and I knew we went to that hospital. And then when we went back and got 2 more, this is the second 2 when we went to that hospital.
Right on the edge of the MDT or something.
Now later on, when things calm down, you can take that iPad, you can take your cell phone with the EM Track software, and bloop, bring it up. It says that patient always exists. So you merge the patients, and then it says, oh, that patient was picked up at Tri-Point Hospital, and then was transferred to wherever.
CMC.
So got transferred, and now we can actually follow that patient all the way through. And at some point, somebody scanned the driver's license, and now all the information's in there. So now it's so much easier for you to report. But if you don't have that number, and that number does not stay with the patient, all is lost.
Yeah, because when you're moving these patients, or for any type of dynamic incident, let's say a family member, they're either going to drive to the scene, right, or they're going to drive to the closest hospital and just think their family member's there. And that's where the tag and understanding where the patient's going to end up could at least direct those family members to get to that family reunification down the road as well.
Right. So we went from triage, treatment, and transport to adding tracking to that. Because after Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, all those patients got moved to other states from nursing homes. There was a presidential directive that came out and said, listen, this is not going to happen again. And so it ordered all the states to come up with their own tracking system. So the state of Ohio came up with OHTRAC. And what that system did was, it was a way for EMS to scan or type in the number if they don't have a scanner and put them in. Or if they arrived at the hospital with a tag, the hospital could use that tag number. And OHTRAC only went with so much success in EMS, especially in our area. When they decided to roll out EM Track, which is a product of a company called Juvari, Juvari also makes Web EOC, which most counties in Ohio use for emergency management situations. All of a sudden it made sense, because now you can picture that the county EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, is actually going to be the hub of information for family reunification. Because EMS doesn't want to do reunification. The hospital doesn't want to do reunifications. The police do not want to do it. Like law enforcement says, we're out. Like these families show up at the scene and they're like, I just want to know where my daughter is. You know? And now we can actually say we have a procedure for doing this, and that's using the county EOC to do that. So they actually can pull up that software on their computer, EM Track. They can log in, and they can start to find where these patients are going or where they're at, and give the families the answers they want, and keep them out of your station.
Yeah. We had a question from the audience. I think it was more directed to Dr. Hill. When does an MCI on the scene become an MCI to the hospitals? If you have patients driving themselves to the hospital, or family members, or the cops, and then we're bringing you victims, at what point are we becoming an MCI at the hospital for you now?
Tuesday at 6 o'clock?
Yeah. So anytime you guys declare mass casualty in the field, 9 times out of 10, we're going to declare what we call a code yellow. in the hospital. So a code yellow is going to be some disaster has happened. That could be lots of reasons, but in this case, be a mass casualty. Funny bring this up is we did exactly this 2 weeks ago. So at my hospital, a few days prior, we did an exercise, and 5 days later, we had the real thing, where local EMS called, said they have a mass casualty incident. It was 2 vehicles involved, but one had 7 patients in one vehicle, 2 in the other, 9 total trauma patients, 5 were children. So they activated a mass casualty from that scene, and interesting enough, we talk about having multiple patients inside vehicles, ambulances. One ambulance, which really overwhelmed the hospital when they showed up, had 5 patients in one ambulance. So 3 ambulances total transported 9 total patients, I believe is how it ended up working out. But as soon as they made that call, we activated our code yellow inside the hospital system. That triggers off hospital resources, as well as, because we're part of University Hospitals, system-wide resources started coming into university hospitals. We launched 2 helicopters. And I believe we had 4 ambulances.
4 ground trucks.
Ground crews, 1 critical care.
1 critical care, 3 ALS.
Yep. Show up at the hospital, waiting to transport these patients out. We work great with our local fire departments. So I called one of our local fire departments, and their medics worked for us as well. They were well staffed that evening, thank goodness. Hopped in an ambulance and actually drove from the neighboring city over to the hospital to wait as more resources in case we became overwhelmed before I could have UH resources show up. So kind of like with what we talk about with strokes and STEMIs and trauma alerts, this is just yet another alert that we want to be made aware of, and we want to be made aware of as soon as possible. So in kind of doing our after action review from both our drill as well as this actual event, we're starting to make some process changes even at the hospital when this happens. We're actually starting to build in redundancies, because in both our live and our real event and our play event, our training, we had communication failures, which I brought up during the live episode. Communication is always a big issue. So now what we're doing is we're building in redundancies to communication, so that way that's not have a single point of failure when it comes to it. So what I am now going out, and I'm talking about this from my own personal experience, is I expect a minimum of 3 calls from each disaster. The first one's probably not even going to be from the scene. It's going to be probably from dispatch.
Dispatcher, yep.
I want that phone call to be come to the hospital and say, I have a mass casualty incident. It's either going to be, it's a shooting, it's a chemical spill, it's a bomb explosion, it's
initial information.
Yeah, just initial information. If we even know estimated number of patients, that's more beneficial to us. And that just gives us more time to start rolling our resources that aren't necessarily at the hospital. So when we talk about STEMIs, we talk about door to balloon less than 30 minutes. And during the night, most STEMIs have that 30-minute window to try to even just start the cath lab up to be able to receive a patient. We're going to have a much longer lag time to get resources mobilized at a hospital during a mass casualty, especially if it's not between the hours of 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. in the afternoon, when the OR start to staff down because there aren't procedures going on, there's not staff available, we don't have anesthesia, the surgeons are starting to leave because that's the end of their day, or they're not necessarily the end of the day, but that's the end of their operative period, and now they're going into their clinical time and they're not going to be in the hospital. So again, every time you guys declare a mass casualty, we're going to match the same at the hospital, and we're going to start to expect the worst, hoping that we don't need to use those resources. In our actual event, we used 2 out of the 4 ambulances.
Yeah, we started rolling them back.
Yeah. So we once we got more information and I got on scene and understood what the process was, we turned around the helicopters.
Backed off the helicopters, and then
that level of care, but we still needed ground care, and we spent 1 by critical care and 1 by ALS to the pediatric trauma center, because they were both kids.
Both kids.
It in certain ways, it worked out well, and one of my colleagues goes, "Is this actually what happens during?" Yes, this is actually what's supposed to happen.
This is how it's supposed to go?
During code yellow. So you get all these resources, and hopefully we stand around and don't do anything. If we have to do everything, we want as many resources there as possible. to manage through it, and we managed through it great. But there's also things during that incident that didn't go great that now we're looking back upon.
So what happens if the mass casualty is at the hospital itself?
So, great question. The same process actually happens. So we will call a code yellow. That code yellow will be given more information, whether that if the let's say that there's even a chemical spill or a outage of some piece of software that's critical to operations, oxygen system goes down, vacuum system goes down, HVAC goes down, could be code yellow. If we can't control the temperature of the hospital and can't control the patients, that's going to become an issue. So the same process happens for us, whether it's a mass casualty outside of the hospital or happens inside of the hospital. The only thing that's probably different than that would be a code red, which would be a fire inside the hospital, but that's just because we need different resources and handle active fire. And I don't think any of the CMC does not have a in-house firefighting brigade.
No.
Do they? I don't think any local hospitals have one now.
No.
So we rely on outside resources to fight those fires. But even then, we might pull resources from the community to come to the hospital. If I have to now evacuate a hospital, if I've got a hurricane coming my way,
Right, yeah.
and I've got to evacuate, I'm going to need all my resources, and we're going to be pulling from primarily local county 911 agencies to start transporting these interfacility transports, which you guys probably don't do on a regular basis, right? But we're going to take all those resources to move those patients out of harm's way to keep them as safe as possible.
You know, I like one thing that you did say about that was once surgery starts shutting down at that golden hour and
Yep.
and all that, and what kind of crew you have at night, and you go back to the Pulse nightclub,
Sure.
time of day,
Yep.
Aurora, Colorado, Las Vegas.
Yep.
You know, a lot of times our biggest ones are after midnight. Just like Dad always said, nothing good happens after midnight.
Suboptimal times, yeah.
Yeah. So, but
So do I have to
unfortunately, that's
wear
when the
clean underwear
hospital.
every day?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's when the hospital, is definitely down also on resources.
Yeah,
Another
Mr. Valscale.
online question was asked, and this might not pertain to this or not, but recently apparently there's a saline shortage. What would we anticipate if there was a mass casualty incident now for that? Should we limit resources to what hospitals we're going to? Should they need fluid replacements?
So obviously, IV fluid shortage is a big issue right now. For those who don't know, Baxter plant in South Carolina provided about 60% of the large bag IV fluids
Got walloped, yeah.
to the country. I believe the plant's up and running, not at full capacity. People
On
are,
a temporary bridge, right, to the plant?
yeah,
Or
they-
down one of the main roads to the
Yeah,
plant?
so not only did the plant get hit, but also transportation around the area, high up in the mountains. Not something we're expected to have flood issues from a national area issue, but transportation's an issue, access is an issue. But right now we are minimizing our fluids. But I mean, you still got to take care of the patient, right? If I'm taking care of a patient in the ER, if they need fluids, I'm still ordering them fluids. Especially if they can't drink fluids, they're getting IV fluids. We'll have to manage that obviously a few days down the road. When we started, at least in our area, a lot of people were reporting 2 weeks of fluids availability. That is slowly dwindling down. We start to worry when they have less than 3 days, and then we start about moving that around. But for one instant, we can handle that initial influx, and then we can talk about reallocation and moving resources around within the region, whether that's hospital to hospital. One of the things that I'm actively working on this week is actually reaching out to my EMS agencies to see what fluids they have in stock and when they expire. Because if they expire in 2024, let's swap those out. I'll use them in the hospital today.
Right, yeah.
Before they expire, before you might use them in the field. So things that we're looking out to better utilize these resources. To my knowledge, I don't think we've gotten approval to use any fluids past expiration, but right now the hospitals use so much fluids, expiration dates way far out. We worried more that came up in my regional call about it is like, well, what about veterinary clinics? Like, do they have stock that's expiring? Could we swap that out? Can we even use that stock? Is it approved for you to use? Dental offices we don't have a lot of interaction with from a disaster standpoint. Dental medicine is not something we really think about. Are they using fluids? Can we make sure that those fluids don't expire and use as much as we can just to limit waste?
Yeah.
So.
But that's another reason to disperse your patients in any type of a mass casualty anyways.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you're dumping them all on one hospital, and if everybody's got even 3 days supply, you're just going to kill that one hospital. So we always want to remember that we're trying not to move the disaster from the highway or from the schoolyard to the hospital. Like,
Another
disperse them appropriately.
Yeah, that's completely ideal. And in some areas, it's not even possible.
Sure.
So when we brought up my real incident, they're like, why didn't you go to this other hospital? Well, it was twice as far away, and everyone essentially came to me. So that disaster on the turnpike came to a disaster at my facility. And I think that all the hospitals have prepared for that. We know that whatever the local hospital is, it's going to become a disaster there. How do we mitigate all of those risks when it comes to managing that disaster at our own hospital? And that's why we present resources there to help manage it, because I know I'm gonna, just like we set up casualty collection points on scene, that local hospital becomes the casualty collection point for all of those patients, because they're gonna come by private vehicle, they're gonna come by police, they're gonna also come by ambulance, and you're safe, I'm gonna transfer you out because you need resources that I don't have, but you're safe to travel.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk a little bit about some of the suggestions that your team came up with?
Sure, this tag was a prototype that a region, NECO region, Northeast Central Ohio, they've adopted, and they've already got their tags printed.
Yep.
We're working on it for Northeastern Ohio. We just kind of came up with the best of all the tags. We put them out as a prototype to try to get suggestions. We got the suggestions back. We changed them. And this was one of our earlies. It's really pretty simple. There's not a lot to it. So it does have some boxes for some vital signs. It lets you re-triage by color. So if you triage at yellow at one point and then you decide, no, this is a red, and then somebody else is like, no, this is really a yellow compared to the reds we have, we're going to make this one a yellow, you can go ahead and do that 3 different times. Very little information to go on there, but the big keys are the wristband, which is easy to tear off, and then the wristband has the number on it. So it says right on it that it's a disaster tag, do not remove. So hopefully no hospital people will remove it. But now that number is a permanent fixture. There's obviously a number on the tag itself that's non-removable, but then it gives you 8 stickers. So when you take a sticker, you can go ahead and give it to your transportation officer. So basically we just say the transportation officer puts his foot out and stops the cot on the way by to the ambulance, says, where are you going? That's what I thought. And so you're just going to take that sticker, stick it on there, and say this is the patient transported by this ambulance to this facility. And if you want to put down their name, if you want to put down their code of their triage level of color, that's fine. The only other thing was, a lot of times our training now is using MAP rather than blood pressure. And I know that I've often said that, if you've got a really unstable patient, that you're just trying to continue getting vitals on every couple minutes, that sometimes that blood pressure, one number goes up, one number goes down a little bit, and you're looking at it going, my brain can't function with that. That MAP is just an easy one number. Like, if the MAP has gone from 73 to 64 during your transport, like, this is getting worse. Mm-hmm. So we did put MAP on there. There were a lot of suggestions like, well, do we really want people using MAP if they don't have access? And it's really more like, if you have it and want to use it, it's there, but you don't have to.
Well, I think it's another data point, right, to look at. So that way, if for either A, you're going to be like, I want to simplify this in my brain, I'm going to use MAP. Calculation MAP's not hard. Most people are using monitors anyways. They calculate a MAP.
Gives you the MAP.
Yep. So, but I think you said something really important, that you're reassessing those patients, and if things are going the wrong direction, especially if they were yellow, maybe you're going to upgrade them unit transport, or like just look at, it doesn't look right, I'm going to reassess them. If they're trending in the wrong way, but they still meet like a yellow or green criteria, if they're going the wrong way, I would just upgrade them to that next level, because that's where they're going. Either it's going to be in 1 minute, 5 minutes, or 15 minutes, but that's where they're going.
Yeah. Sure. They can easily be delivered to the ER saying, I got a yellow that's looking a lot like a red really quick here.
Yep.
So
And we're going to
it
retriage
makes
them
it pretty
anyways.
clear. Right.
So we should have our most experienced person at that door eyeballing them to go, ooh, that doesn't look good. You need to go here. Hey, we're going to do one thing, and then, oh, we have an OR available. We're just taking you straight to an OR.
Yeah. And really any tag is usable. You know, you can use up tags that you have, even departments that are getting these if they want to train with them or play with them. Some departments have said, no, we want to switch to the new tag. We want to train on it. We want to use it, which is fine. Departments that don't have a newer tag with those tear-offs, you just have to figure out a way around that. You know, whether it's using your iPad to snap a picture of that one code that's on there. If you have the MET tag, you don't have a lot of tear-offs with numbers, receipts, so you can take a picture of it, or you can take a picture of that with your phone, and so that at least you've got those numbers documented. You can write them down. You know, we went to the largest number of digits. I want to say ours are 10 digits, and there's no letters because some scanning software doesn't like letters. And unfortunately, some of the tags will add like NC and then a number, which then all of a sudden the scanner's like, I got nothing. Like I can't read that. So we just went to a number straight, 10 digits. Anything else on the tag, Dr. Hill?
Thoughts, guys? We got one last online question.
Yeah, we're Nico Regions. We're rolling these out. We developed these, sent them to fire stations. They're starting to train on them, and then we're going to start even further practicing with these tags. I'm getting some. It's hard. It's hard to from my standpoint of trying to advise people on what to do and recommendations. That I hate to burn through new tags, but you also need experience with the new tags, and you also have all this old stock. I want them to get experience with tagging people. Whether you use this tag or the Virginia Commonwealth tag, the DC tag, whatever tag, they all kind of operate the same way. We're going to color code people. We're going to have a number on there. We're going to have the ability to document some general notes, or even if it's a avatar where you're marking where it hurts. Mm-hmm. Where did the gun touch you at? They all kind of work
Never
the
seen
same.
that in a book. Never seen that.
But yeah, I think that this is a step in the right direction, and I think that I want to say that Virginia copied us, but I mean they were going in the same direction we were.
Yeah, I think we all know the best way to go. And you know, the other thing was you really had a choice of a string or a rubber band.
Yeah.
And that, you know, the strings tended to be a little bit more. They slip a little more and stuff like that, where you could wrap this a couple times around an arm, a leg, whatever, instead of the string around the neck where the card's hanging up here on the chest, where a lot of times we need to be working. So we went with orange kind of as a theme, kind of going off that orange ribbon theme. So we stuck with the orange wristband, orange rubber band, which is easy to buy. And so we were able to get these for initially just under $1 a piece, and then more recent quote was just over $1 a piece. And that's comparable to any other tag.
Any other tags?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I got.
All right. Yeah. Well, I got one last online question here, and USM 46 asks, is Jumpstart still the best option to apply to pediatric patients?
So I think that, in my opinion, that Jumpstart is, if you're going to use Start, like especially on a static event, Jumpstart was designed with pediatric numbers in mind, with RPM. So, and some of the treatment order is different, if I remember right. SALT has not been created for pediatrics that I know of. Someone may have done it. I'm not aware of it. So if you're going to use Start on the patients, I think that that's the best way. I feel like if you had gunshot wounds to a pediatric patient, that you may find that Jumpstart is not real good for the same problems. That, well, his numbers are in the parameters, so
yeah,
he must be agreeing, where we can clearly go, no, I don't think so. I feel like Jumpstart is the best we have for pediatrics, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with starting with that. But just understand the pitfalls of what these have and say, penetrating torso. Sorry, my friend, that is always a red in my book.
Guys, anything else?
No, I think we're gonna share this on our website.
We'll put that on the website, which is the transport officer log that Don brought us here today. And man, we appreciate you coming
Absolutely.
out of retirement
There's never really retirement. Is there? It's never really retirement.
to come talk to the audience
Absolutely.
about this. This is great stuff, and so. And again, we appreciate all you tuning in, and those of you that jumped online and asked questions. We'd love it if you go over to YouTube and subscribe, follow us there. That would be excellent. And again, everything and more about all these episodes, prehospitalparadigm.com. Thank y'all. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.